Poor mechanic fixed wheelchair for a bride. Mocked as too fat, she quietly rebuilt his world. Have you ever met someone who quietly walked into your life and rebuilt it without a single grand gesture? This is a story about a worn-down mechanic in a forgotten town, a bride left behind in the mud, and how two broken wheels and two broken hearts found a reason to move forward again. But it's not what you think. There's no dramatic rescue, no sweeping romance, just kindness, quiet moments, and a reminder that sometimes the people who change us the most are the ones who never try to fix us at all. If you believe in second chances, in healing that comes not with noise but with stillness, then stay with me. This story might just stay with you. Before we begin, if you're drawn to heartfelt stories that linger in your soul long after the final word, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and tap the bell. We share stories that heal, stories that remind us what it means to be human. Now make yourself a cup of tea and settle in, because this is the story of the mechanic, the wheelchair, and the woman who quietly rebuilt his world. The old garage sat at the edge of Maple Road like a forgotten punctuation mark, a low, square building with peeling white paint and a tin roof that echoed the moods of the sky. It was the kind of place you might miss if you weren't looking for it, and even then, you might drive past twice before realizing it wasn't abandoned. Inside, the scent of motor oil clung to the air like memory. Tools hung on pegboards with the reverence of ritual, each in its place, clean and ready. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, humming softly, a tired song for a tired room. Cal Dawson worked in silence, his fingers coaxing an old alternator back to life. His hands were steady, sure. They always had been, even when the rest of him wasn't. Outside, October whispered through the trees. Wind rustled fallen leaves across the asphalt like forgotten letters, and a layer of cold clung to the glass like breath held too long. Cal didn't notice. He was tall, in the way old barns are tall, built to carry more than they should. His flannel shirt was rolled to the elbows, grease stains pressed into the fabric like old bruises. A streak of silver cut through his dark hair, more from sorrow than age. He hadn't always been this way. Once laughter had lived in his chest. Once a woman named Rachel had stood in this very garage, barefoot and laughing, balancing coffee mugs in both hands. But that was 6 winters ago, before the diagnosis, before the long drives to the city, before everything became before. Since then, Cal lived the way some people read poetry, slowly, deliberately, and alone. The bell above the door hadn't rung in over 2 hours. The shop phone hadn't rung all day. That was fine with him. There was comfort in quiet, in repetition. He liked the honesty of machines. They didn't lie. They didn't leave. If something broke, you could find the part and fix it. Simple. But people didn't come with manuals. Cal stepped back from the workbench, wiping his hands on a rag as he glanced at the clock. 6:17 p.m. Eli would be upstairs, headphones in, eyes glued to some screen, eating cereal from the box again. Cal sighed. He would try, again, to talk later. Maybe over dinner, if Eli even came down. The kettle on the hot plate began to hiss. He moved to pour himself a mug of instant coffee, pausing to rub the ache in his shoulder. It was going to snow soon. He could feel it in his joints. Then just as he brought the mug to his lips, something outside caught his eye. A flash of white across the gravel. He stepped to the window and squinted. There across the road, on the edge of the overgrown lot, sat a figure in white. Not the crisp white of new snow, but the rumpled, muddied white of something that had once been beautiful and had fallen hard. A woman in a wedding dress and a wheelchair. The wheels were caked in mud, the hem of the dress tangled and torn. She was sitting still, almost too still, like a mannequin forgotten in the rain. Her shoulders slumped forward. The wind played with her veil, lifting it in tired waves. Cal didn't hesitate. He set the mug down without drinking and grabbed his jacket. The gravel crunched under his boots as he crossed the street, his breath a mist in the chill. As he approached, he took in the details. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. Her makeup had run, leaving pale trails down her cheeks. She didn't look up when he knelt beside her. The wheelchair's left wheel was loose, wobbling slightly with every breath of wind. Mud clung to the spokes, packed into the axles. One of the footrests was hanging by a single bolt. Cal crouched lower. "Mind if I take a look?" Still, she didn't answer. But she didn't stop him either. So he worked. No fanfare, no questions, just hands that knew what they were doing. He wiped the mud gently from the wheels, careful not to touch her legs unless absolutely necessary. He checked the brake locks, tightened the loose bolts with a wrench he always kept in his jacket pocket. Each movement was deliberate, not because he was unsure, but because she deserved gentleness. When he finished, he stood and looked into her face for the first time. She was young, maybe early 30s, but the lines at the corners of her mouth spoke of someone older. Not in years, but in disappointments. Her eyes were dark, haunted but defiant, like someone who'd learned how to stay afloat in deep water. "I've got a garage just there," Cal said, nodding to the building. "It's warm. You're welcome to sit inside a while. Looks like it's going to rain." She didn't speak, but her eyes flicked toward the building, then back to him. And after a long, loaded pause, she nodded once. Cal exhaled through his nose. Not relief exactly, but something close. He stepped behind her and began to push, slowly, carefully, mindful of the uneven gravel and her silence. The air was heavy with the smell of wet leaves and something else. The raw scent of a moment you knew would change things, even if you didn't know how. As they crossed into the garage's warm, quiet space, Cal reached over and flipped the small lamp on his workbench. Its soft yellow glow filled the room like a sigh. He pulled a stool near the heater, offered her a blanket, and set a clean mug of hot soup, not coffee this time, in front of her. She still didn't speak, but she took the mug. He didn't ask why she was there or what had happened. He simply sat a few feet away and returned to his work, pretending not to glance over every so often, pretending not to notice when her shoulders finally relaxed. Just a little. Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside, two strangers sat in quiet, not knowing that silence, the right kind, is sometimes the first kind of hope. She didn't say her name. Not when Cal guided the wheelchair up the narrow ramp into the garage. Not when he handed her the blanket. Not even when he brought over the small ceramic bowl of soup. Chicken and wild rice, still steaming, the kind Rachel used to make on cold days when they both pretended winter couldn't get in. She took it wordlessly, cradling the bowl in her palms like something she wasn't sure she deserved to hold. Cal didn't push. He'd learned that lesson a long time ago. Some people talk when they're ready, others never do. The important thing was to make space for both. The garage took on a hush, like a chapel at dusk. The only sounds were the quiet clink of his tools and the occasional crackle of rain starting to fall on the tin roof above. Soft at first, like a whisper, then steadier, more insistent. Outside, the world turned to gray. Inside, the light over Cal's workbench painted the shadows in gold. She sat by the heater, the blanket draped across her lap, hair damp and curling near her face. Her makeup was mostly gone now. What remained was raw, unfiltered, real. Her wedding dress, mud-stained, bunched awkwardly beneath her, gave her the look of someone caught in the wrong dream. A princess who'd wandered too far from the storybook. Cal went back to his workbench, the rhythm of the task grounding him. He cleaned his tools slowly, wiped them down, aligned them like a ceremony. His back was to her, but he could feel the heaviness of her presence, the way someone does when another person is thinking too loudly. "You didn't ask," she said finally. Her voice was low, rough from crying, from silence. Cal didn't turn. "Didn't think you wanted me to." A pause, then, "Why help me?" He set a wrench back into its cradle before answering. "Wheel was bent. Brake was loose. You were cold." She let out a breath. "That's not an answer." "It's mine," he said simply, finally turning to face her. Their eyes met. Hers were dark, almost black, ringed with exhaustion and something else. Something like the last edge of anger, or maybe the first spark of fear. "I've had people look right through me," she said. "Even before this." She gestured vaguely toward the wheelchair. "But today, it was like I was invisible and monstrous at the same time." Cal didn't answer. He didn't know how. So he walked to the corner and picked up a pair of house slippers, his wife's old ones, wool-lined, worn but clean. He knelt in front of the chair and offered them gently. "You don't have to keep those on," he said, nodding at the satin heels dangling awkwardly from her feet. "They don't look like they were made for gravel and rain." She stared at the slippers like they were a relic from a world she no longer belonged to. Then slowly, she slipped out of the heels and into the warmth, her toes curled into the lining. For a moment, her expression softened. "I didn't even like the dress," she muttered. Cal almost smiled. "You don't say." A longer pause now. The rain tapped more insistently on the roof, and thunder grumbled far off, as if unsure of itself. They said I should feel lucky, she went on, still not quite looking at him, that someone like him would marry someone like me. Cal didn't ask who they were. He didn't need to. He said it too, once, not in so many words, but gestures, silences, the way he held my hand like he was showing charity. The bitterness in her voice wasn't sharp. It was weary, threadbare from use, a blade that had dulled over time. Cal leaned against the workbench. You left. She laughed once, bitterly. He left, at the altar, said he needed time. The rest followed him, like ducks behind a mother. A flash of something, grief, fury crossed her face, then settled into numbness again. I sat there, as she said, for 2 hours. In the dress, in the mud. No one offered a ride. No one asked if I was okay. I guess no one wanted to be seen with the fat bride. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she turned her face away quickly, blinking hard. Cal stayed quiet for a moment, letting the words settle between them like ash. Then he said with careful calm, You want some tea? She blinked, startled. What? I've got some chamomile, or black if you prefer. He didn't offer platitudes, didn't say she was beautiful, or strong, or brave, didn't contradict her pain. He just walked to the kettle, filled it, and lit the flame beneath. You treat me like I'm normal, she said after a moment. Cal didn't turn. I don't see why I wouldn't. She watched him for a long beat. Then, most people don't. He shrugged. Most people don't fix their own alternators either. Doesn't mean I stopped trying to teach them. This time she actually smiled. Small, lopsided, like a window crack just enough to let light in. What's your name? She asked. Cal. She nodded. I'm Lena. He handed her the steaming mug of tea. Their fingers didn't touch, but something passed between them all the same. A silent agreement. A pause in the storm. She sipped. He sat nearby, not close enough to crowd, just near enough to anchor. And outside, the rain washed the mud from the road, leaving the scent of clean earth and something beginning again. The storm passed in the night. By morning, the garage was wrapped in mist, soft and low, like the town itself had drawn a blanket over its shoulders. Rain still clung to the eaves, dripping slowly from the metal roof in steady rhythm. Inside, the air smelled of coffee, steel, and something gentler, something warm and human. Lena woke to the hum of machines, but not the harsh clang of work, more like a lullaby in iron and grease. She sat quietly in the blanket Cal had given her, legs tucked neatly beneath the layers of her dress. The satin was wrinkled beyond repair, the lace at her sleeves torn. Her hair was matted slightly from sleep, and her eyes bore the puffiness of tears long since dried. But for the first time in days, perhaps weeks, she didn't feel like a spectacle. Just a person in a chair, in a garage, with the smell of breakfast hanging in the air. Cal was already at the stove, a makeshift hot plate tucked beside his tool bench. A pot of something bubbled gently. He moved with the quiet precision of someone who had learned to survive through rituals. Coffee, bolts, broth, repeat. He glanced over his shoulder. You like eggs? Lena blinked. Yeah, I guess. Scrambled okay? She nodded. He cracked 2 into the skillet without another word. No small talk, no probing, just breakfast. The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was companionable, like the kind shared between old friends or people who'd both known loss too well to fill space with needless sound. Lena had lived through enough forced conversations to recognize the rare comfort of someone who didn't need her to perform. She watched him work, the way his shoulders moved, the way his hands were sure but unhurried. His face was unreadable, the kind of expression forged by long days and quiet disappointments. He didn't flinch from her gaze, but he didn't linger in it either. When the eggs were done, he plated them with toast and a bowl of the soup from last night. Still warm, still healing. He brought it to her without ceremony. I didn't know how hungry I was, she murmured, half to herself. That's usually how it works, he replied, then sat a short distance away, sipping his coffee from a dented thermos. They ate quietly. The rain had stopped completely now. Birds chirped uncertainly, testing the air as if unsure the storm was really over. After a while, Lena looked up. Do you always do this? Cal raised an eyebrow. Scramble eggs? No, she smiled faintly. Let strangers in. Share soup. Offer blankets to muddy brides in broken chairs. He considered that for a moment, then shrugged. Not often, but I've learned not to ignore what's in front of me. She studied him. And what did you see when you looked at me yesterday? A broken wheel, he said, and someone who needed to be warm. Lena looked away, blinking hard. You make it sound simple. Most things are. It's people that complicate them. The words hung in the air for a moment, then settled into quiet understanding. From upstairs, the faint thud of footsteps echoed, slow, hesitant. Lena turned toward the sound. You live alone? Cal followed her gaze. Not exactly. My son Eli, 16, doesn't come down much. She nodded, not pushing. The boy hadn't shown himself yet, but there was something in Cal's voice, a tenderness edged with weariness, that made her think the silence upstairs ran deep. I didn't see his room. Back corner, he likes quiet. She paused. Like you. Cal sipped his coffee. Not sure he had much choice in it. Lena didn't respond. She didn't need to. Silence, she understood, wasn't always chosen. It was sometimes what grief left behind when it took all the words. She wheeled herself a little closer to the window. Outside, the world looked newly washed. The trees shimmered with leftover rain, and the puddles reflected patches of sky peeking through low clouds. I used to love days like this, she said softly. After storms, the quiet, the smell of everything trying again. Cal glanced at her. What stopped you? She hesitated. The chair, the stairs, the way people act like I've disappeared, or worse, become something to pity. He didn't correct her, didn't tell her she was wrong or strong or beautiful. He just nodded, and in that small gesture, she felt seen. I used to design wheelchairs, she said suddenly, surprising even herself. Not build them, just the concepts. Smart features, flexible frames, even one that could climb curbs. Thought I'd make life easier. For people like me. Funny, huh? Why'd you stop? My accident happened before I finished the program. Then, everything changed. Family, expectations, the way people looked at me. They thought if I just found a man who accepted me, everything would be fine. Her voice cracked on the last word. Cal didn't say anything. Lena turned away from the window, eyes glazed. Yesterday, I believed them. Today, I'm in a stranger's garage, wearing house slippers and eating reheated soup. She laughed, and it was brittle but real. I've had worse mornings, Cal said deadpan. Lena stared at him, then let out a laugh. A real one this time. You're not what I expected. He raised a brow. I get that a lot. Something shifted between them then. Not romance, not yet, but something better. The beginning of trust. The footsteps upstairs came again, closer this time, then a pause at the top of the stairs just out of sight. Cal looked up but didn't call out. Lena followed his gaze. He's watching? Yeah. She smiled but didn't wave or speak. Let him take his time. Cal nodded. He always does. For a while they just sat. The morning unfolded slowly, like a letter written by hand. Quiet, deliberate, full of pauses that meant more than words. Outside, the sky cleared just enough for light to spill across the floor, pooling near Lena's feet. She stretched one leg out instinctively, letting the warmth touch her skin. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't flinch from being seen. The light in the garage was different that afternoon. Softer somehow, filtered through the old bay windows like it had been warmed by memory before it touched the floor. Dust floated in slow motion across the sunbeams, catching the air like silver threads, delicate and real. Lena had been there 3 days. No one came looking for her. Not the groom, not the family, not a single friend. It should have surprised her. It didn't. She didn't ask Cal how long she could stay. He didn't offer a limit. The arrangement, if it could be called that, existed in a quiet space between them, built on soup, chamomile tea, and the kind of silence that held respect instead of pity. That morning, she'd asked if she could help around the garage. I've got 2 good arms, she'd said, and I used to know my way around a schematic. Cal looked at her over his coffee. You know how to handle carburetors? I know how not to break them. He didn't smile, but something in his eyes shifted, like a muscle long dormant waking up. You can sort the tool drawer, if you're bored. Fair warning, she replied, wheeling herself toward the rusted red cabinet in the corner. I'm obsessive about organization. I might alphabetize your wrenches. Cal gave her a long look. Good luck finding enough labels. The drawer was a mess. Loose bolts, mismatched sockets, a handful of washers coated in grease, and time. Lena rolled up her sleeves and got to work, her hands moving with practiced grace. She didn't need to walk to know how to move with purpose. As she sorted, she hummed, quietly, absently, an old folk tune she half remembered from her childhood. It was something her grandmother used to sing while threading needles in the morning light. Cal didn't interrupt her. He simply worked across the room, taking apart a lawnmower engine with the quiet intensity of someone who preferred machines to people. But as the minutes passed, Lena found herself speaking. Not because she needed to, but because the silence was safe enough to hold words that mattered. I used to think I'd be an inventor. Cal glanced up. Not the kind in cartoons, she continued. Not steam-powered flying shoes or laser-frying toasters. I wanted to design things that made people feel human, things that didn't just function, but gave dignity back. He wiped his hands on a rag. Like wheelchairs? Like wheelchairs, she said more softly now. I had this concept once. Pressure-responsive cushions, built-in temperature regulation, shock absorbers in the wheels. Not flashy, just kind. But then, she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Cal set down the wrench slowly. What happened? Lena paused. I got hit crossing the street. I was 25. Broke my spine. I spent a year in rehab. By the time I got out, everything had changed. I couldn't afford to finish school. And suddenly everyone thought the only thing I should focus on was coping. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. The bitterness in her voice was dry, like an old wound that had stopped bleeding but still ached in the rain. I wanted to keep working, she said. I still had the ideas. But every job interview ended with a look that said, we're not sure you can keep up. Even when they didn't say it out loud, I knew. Cal's brow furrowed. People can be blind. They don't want to be reminded, she said quietly, of how fragile they are, how one moment could turn their whole life sideways. She placed a socket wrench neatly into the now organized tray. I thought maybe if I got married, it would give my family back some sense of control, like I wasn't broken anymore, that I had value again. Cal didn't speak, but his stillness said more than any words. Lena looked at him. Do you think I'm broken? He met her eyes without flinching. Do you? Her breath caught. She didn't know how to answer that. Across the room, a faint creak sounded from the upstairs landing. They both turned slightly instinctively. A shadow passed the small frosted window in the garage door. Eli. Lena didn't say anything, didn't raise her voice to call him down. She only returned to the drawer, quietly rearranging the screwdrivers into 2 neat rows. He listens, you know, Cal said after a moment. She glanced up. Eli, I can tell when he's near. He doesn't talk much anymore, not since Rachel died. Lena's voice softened. Your wife? Cal nodded. Cancer, quick and cruel. I'm sorry. He didn't respond, just ran a cloth slowly over a spark plug, like the act of cleaning it was enough to hold grief at bay. Eli was 12, he said finally. He stopped playing baseball, stopped going to the lake. He shut down, and he paused. I tried to hold it together. For him, for me. But some nights, I just stood at the bottom of the stairs and listened, hoping he'd come down. He never did. Lena swallowed hard. That kind of silence is heavy. Cal nodded, then looked at her. Really looked. But since you came, he's been closer to the stairs. She blinked. You think I did that? I think you don't force things. People feel that. Lena let the words settle. Then with a small, almost shy smile, she said, if he ever wants to talk, I'm pretty good at not talking back. Cal chuckled, the sound low and brief, but real. They worked a little longer after that, each lost in their own task, their own rhythm. The afternoon light stretched longer across the floor, casting the garage in golden amber. And when the drawer was finally finished, each tool resting in its proper place, Lena leaned back in her chair, letting the sun warm her face. Across from her, Cal watched, then said softly, you know, I never liked that drawer. Always meant to fix it. She smiled, eyes still closed. Sometimes all it needs is someone to see the mess and believe it's worth sorting. Outside, the world carried on. Trucks passed, leaves fell. But inside that old garage, 2 strangers sat with their broken things, slowly putting them back together. One drawer at a time. The garage creaked gently in the morning wind, as if it too were stretching old bones. Outside, frost clung to the grass in delicate webs. The air smelled of damp soil and chimney smoke. Autumn slowly folding into winter. Lena sat near the window, a book open on her lap. She hadn't turned a page in 10 minutes. Instead, her gaze flicked, every so often, toward the narrow staircase in the back corner. Toward the 2nd floor, where Eli lived in the hush of grief, the quiet weight of a boy who had once laughed, run, believed. She hadn't met him yet. Not really, but she knew he was there. She heard the soft footfalls across the floor at night, The shift in the creaking boards when someone stood behind a door, listening but not stepping out. She'd seen the shadows moving past the upstairs window and the flicker of light from his screen, the bluish glow like a heartbeat in the dark. Eli was present in absence, a ghost still learning how to haunt. Cal, as always, worked methodically. This morning it was a generator, sputtering and uncooperative. Lena sat nearby, sipping from her mug, eyes drifting to the overhead light where dust danced in golden spirals. Was he always quiet? She asked, not looking up. Cal paused. Not before Rachel died. She waited. He was loud, actually, curious. Broke half the tools in this garage trying to figure out how they worked. Cal smiled faintly. Used to call spark plugs light bullets. Thought they were magic. And now? Now he barely eats. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of ache. Lena didn't try to fix it. She just turned another page in her book and said, "He's still watching. From the top of the stairs." Cal nodded. That afternoon, the bell above the garage door jingled, a small, surprise sound in a space unused to visitors. Lena glanced over and saw a boy, maybe 9 or 10, standing in the doorway. Freckles, red hoodie, shoes untied. He held a bent bicycle rim in one hand like a broken promise. "Is this where you fix stuff?" the boy asked. Cal stood wiping his hands. "If it's got wheels or wires, I can probably make it breathe again." The boy hesitated, then spotting Lena, his eyes widened. "Whoa, are you a fairy?" Lena blinked. "Excuse me." He pointed to her. "You've got a blanket over your legs and books, and your hair's all shiny, and you talk quiet like the people in stories." Lena laughed, caught off guard, caught warm. "That's a new one." The boy stepped closer. "My grandma says fairies aren't always tiny. Some are big so they can carry sadness away." Cal raised an eyebrow. "Your grandma sounds wise." "She is. She's got one leg and makes the best banana bread in the whole world." Lena extended her hand. "What's your name, fairy finder?" "Jake." "Well, Jake, I'm not a fairy," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "But I do tell good stories." He grinned. "Even better." Cal knelt beside the rim. "What happened here?" Jake shrugged. "Crashed into Mr. Donnelly's mailbox again. We'll get you rolling." Jake wandered the garage as Cal worked, eventually finding his way to the bench where Lena sat. He poked at the edge of her book. "What are you reading?" "Fairy tales," she said. His eyes sparkled. "Read me one?" She paused. "Only if you promise not to tell anyone I'm a part-time fairy." "I swear on banana bread." She read, slowly, carefully, her voice low and warm. Not performative, just present. Cal listened with one ear as he worked, the rhythm of Lena's voice steady as breath. Upstairs, a floorboard shifted. Lena noticed. She didn't stop reading. Jake leaned against her chair wide-eyed. When she finished the story, he looked at her like he'd just stumbled into a hidden grove. "You should open a fairy shop," he said. "A what?" "A place where people come to hear stories and get their stuff fixed and maybe eat cookies." Cal looked up. "A repair shop and tea room?" Jake nodded. "With magic." Lena smiled, but something flickered in her eyes, like the soft pain of remembering a dream too long buried. "That doesn't sound so crazy," she said. Jake took his newly fixed wheel with a thank you and a high five. As the door closed behind him, Lena leaned back and exhaled. Her shoulders sank into the chair. Not in defeat, just in release. "You okay?" Cal asked. She nodded. "He called me a fairy." "Well," Cal said, "he's not wrong." She looked at him startled. "You show up when it's storming," he continued. "You sit quietly and listen. You fix broken things just by being near them." Lena looked away. "I don't feel like magic." "You don't have to," he said. "You just have to be real." Later that evening, as the sky faded to lavender and the first stars blinked into view, Lena wheeled herself toward the back of the garage where an old wooden table sat unused. She wiped the dust away, lined up a few mugs, and set out a box of chamomile tea she'd found tucked in Cal's pantry. She lit a small lamp and waited. A creak on the stairs. She didn't turn. She heard the soft tread of feet. Then slowly a boy emerged, slender, pale, hair tousled. Eli. He stood by the workbench, unsure, hovering. "Hey," she said without looking up. "There's tea if you want." He didn't answer. But 10 minutes later, a second mug disappeared from the table. Lena smiled to herself and poured another. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The light stayed on long after the garage closed, 2 mugs growing warm side by side. It was Saturday morning, and the garage had yet to open. The quiet held differently today. Not heavy, not hollow, but full of something unspoken. Outside, the trees were shedding the last of their leaves in slow spirals, painting the street in gold and rust. Inside, a low hum came from the space heater, casting a halo of warmth near the far wall where Lena sat folding rags into a neat stack. She liked this hour before the world came knocking, before Jake pedaled up with a new scratch on his handlebars, before Mr. Lansing dropped off his truck and pretended he didn't linger for the company. It was the only hour where the ghost didn't knock too loudly. Cal was upstairs checking on Eli, who'd begun appearing like mist. Quiet, soft, then gone again. Since the tea, since Lena, since something cracked just wide enough to let a little boy look out again. Lena turned toward the supply shelves looking for a fresh towel. She wheeled herself past the workbench, past the stack of used filters, to the bottom cabinet, an old metal drawer she hadn't seen opened yet. The handle stuck slightly as she tugged, reluctant like it held something private. Inside, neatly folded beneath a cloth cover, was a dress. Not just any dress. It was pale blue, the kind of blue that belongs to faded summers and old love songs. Sleeveless, tea-length, simple, elegant, utterly out of place in a garage full of socket wrenches and engine parts. Lena didn't touch it. She only stared for a long time, heart tightening with something both familiar and foreign. She knew what this was, not because she recognized the dress, but because she recognized the weight. The weight of something kept not for use but remembrance. The sound of boots on the stairs broke the stillness. Cal descended with his usual quiet pace, rubbing the back of his neck. He saw her by the drawer and stopped. Their eyes met. Lena gestured gently. "I didn't mean to pry." Cal said nothing for a moment. Then he stepped closer and looked down at the fabric. "That was Rachel's," he said. His voice was low, gravel and memory. "She wore it on our anniversary one year. We didn't go anywhere fancy, just the diner. But she said it made her feel like the kind of woman in old movies, where everything feels slower, more romantic." He reached into the drawer and touched the dress with the back of his fingers. Not caressing, just contact, like proving it was still there. "She died 6 years ago," he said, "but I kept it. Not for the fabric, not even for her. I think I kept it to remind myself I once loved someone that much." Lena nodded, her voice quiet. "I used to have a coat, red wool, too bright for the city, but I wore it anyway. It made me feel brave. I left it in the hospital the day they told me I wouldn't walk again." She didn't say why. She didn't need to. The space between them held that kind of truth, the kind that didn't ask for explanation, only presence. Cal knelt beside the drawer, slid it closed slowly, gently, as if not to wake something sleeping inside. "Do you ever think about throwing it out?" Lena asked. "Sometime," he said. "But then I realize it's not the dress that hurts. It's what I remember when I see it. And if you forget," he looked at her, "then I hope someone else remembers. That she existed, that she loved." Lena's throat tightened. She wheeled back a little, giving him space, but he didn't seem to need it. "I don't think grief ever leaves," he said. "It just changes shape." Lena looked down at her lap, her hands folded like prayer. "I used to think if I lost enough weight, people would stop seeing the chair first." Cal didn't move. "But now I think maybe what I wanted was to be seen without having to perform. To just be." Cal nodded, eyes steady. "You are." Those two words landed like warmth on cold stone. She didn't thank him, not out loud, but something in her shoulders softened. He turned, walked back toward the workbench, then paused. "You want to help me change the oil on Mrs. Baxter's Buick?" She blinked, surprised. "You're letting me near a Buick? You organize the tools better than I ever did. Might as well earn your fairy title." She laughed, the sound rising like a bell. They worked side by side, her gloved hands steady on the wrench while Cal coached from the other side of the hood. Grease smudged her forearm. A strand of hair slipped from her braid. She didn't brush it away. When they finished, Cal leaned against the bench and opened 2 glass bottles of root beer. He handed one to her. "You drink this with Rachel?" she asked. "Every Friday." She said it was her way of rebelling against adulthood. Lena clinked her bottle against his. "To rebellion, then." They drank in silence. Later, just before dusk, Cal went to close up the garage while Lena swept the front steps. A breeze kicked up, scattering brittle leaves across the gravel. She paused, breathing in the scent of oil, tea, and old wood. She thought about the dress in the drawer, the red coat she left behind, the boy upstairs who listened from behind doors. Then she smiled. Not because everything was better, but because, for the first time in a long time, it didn't have to be. The cold had taken on a sharper edge overnight. It was the kind of chill that slipped beneath doors and settled into the bones of old buildings. Of old men too, Cal figured, as he rubbed his shoulder on the walk to the mailbox. The garage was quiet, wrapped in its usual rhythm, heater humming low, Eli still upstairs, Lena wiping down the tool bench with slow, thoughtful strokes. Then the car pulled up. Not a truck like most around here. Not a rusted sedan with cracked taillights and a busted radio. This one was black, polished, silent as it came to a stop in front of the garage. A town car. Big, unmistakably expensive. Cal stood still, mail forgotten in his hands. The back door opened and an older man stepped out. He wore a long wool coat, charcoal gray. His shoes didn't crunch on gravel. They whispered. His eyes scanned the garage, then settled on Cal. There was something sharp in the man's posture, something that had never needed to ask for permission. "Mr. Dawson," he asked, voice smooth and quiet. Cal nodded warily. "I believe you've been helping someone very dear to me." A silence stretched. Then Lena's voice behind him. "Dad." Cal turned. She was at the doorway in her chair, eyes narrowed, back straight, not in fear but readiness, like she'd been expecting this moment and already decided how it would go. The man took a step forward. "Lena, thank God." "Spare the theatrics," she said, and her voice, though calm, had a weight Cal hadn't heard before. "Why are you here?" "To bring you home." "I'm already home." He glanced at the garage, at the grease-streaked floor, the worn workbench, the rusting tools. Something in his jaw tightened. "This isn't a place for you." "It is now." Cal stepped back, instinctively giving them space. But Lena reached out a hand, not for protection, but connection, and her fingers brushed Cal's wrist as if to say, "Stay." "You left your wedding," her father said, quieter now. "You embarrassed your fiancé, your family, yourself." "I was left," she corrected, her voice even, "and frankly, I'm relieved." The man looked at her for a long time, and Cal saw something flicker behind the steel. Grief, maybe. Regret, worn down by pride. "I didn't come to argue," her father said. "I came to say thank you." Cal blinked. "Excuse me?" "You found her," the man said, turning to Cal. "You gave her shelter, dignity, when no one else did. That matters." He reached into his coat, pulled out a slim envelope. "I'd like to offer compensation." Cal's hands didn't move. "Not necessary." Lena wheeled forward, placing herself between the two men. "He didn't help me for money, Dad." Her father sighed. "Not everything is a fight, Lena." "Then why are you always wearing armor?" The question lingered like frost. Finally, Cal spoke. "She's been organizing my garage, reading to kids, helping my son come out of his shell. That's not a debt to be paid." The man hesitated. Then he slipped the envelope back into his coat. "I see." He glanced around again, eyes falling on the old red cabinet by the wall, the tea kettle Lena insisted on keeping plugged in near the power drill. His gaze softened. "She used to draw sketches on napkins," he said, voice quieter now. "When she was a kid, designed a prosthetic arm for her cousin's teddy bear when it lost a limb. She said, even stuffed animals deserve dignity." Lena's eyes glistened. "You made me feel ashamed of that." "I didn't know how to protect you," he admitted, "so I tried to mold you instead." She didn't respond. "I can't change the past," he continued, "but I can give you a future." He pulled a folded paper from his coat pocket and handed it to her. "It's the deed to the lot next door. The town never did anything with it. It's yours if you want it. No strings." Lena unfolded the paper, reading carefully. Cal stood beside her, silent, sensing the shift in her breath. "I don't need your money," she said. "It's not money, it's ground. If this place makes you happy, build something on it." Another long pause. Then Lena looked at him. Not the man she once called father, but the one standing beside her now, the one who had never asked for her history before offering her soup. "I already started," she said softly. Her father nodded, and for the first time since he arrived, he didn't seem like a CEO or a man used to control. He looked simply like a father who had failed and wanted, quietly, humbly, to be forgiven. He reached out once, not demanding, just offering. Lena didn't take his hand, but she didn't recoil either. That was something. He turned to Cal. "Take care of her." Cal nodded. "She's more than capable of taking care of herself." A small, almost imperceptible smile touched the older man's lips. He walked back to the car without another word. The door shut. The engine hummed. Then he was gone. For a long while, neither Cal nor Lena spoke. The wind stirred the leaves on the driveway. Somewhere inside, the heater clicked softly. Lena looked down at the deed in her lap. Her fingers traced the edge of the paper. "You believe in second chances?" she asked. Cal crossed his arms. "Only when someone actually wants to begin again." "I think I do." He nodded toward the lot. "It'll need clearing." "I like a challenge." They stood there for a while, shoulder to shoulder. A woman who'd been discarded, a man who'd lost too much, and the possibility of something new resting quietly between them. Not loud, not dramatic, just present. "I didn't expect him to come," she said. "I didn't expect you to stay," Cal replied. She turned to him, eyes steady. "Well, life's full of surprises." He smiled, small, lopsided, and entirely real. And for the first time since she'd arrived in that muddy dress, Lena didn't feel like someone rebuilding her life. She felt like someone beginning it. The deed sat on the workbench for 2 days before either of them touched it again. Lena had folded it neatly, slid it into a plain envelope, and placed it beside the wrench set like it was just another tool. Something useful, something waiting. The lot next door remained as it always had. Wild, uneven, tufted with weeds and half-buried scrap metal. An old bicycle frame leaned crooked against a birch tree, rusted through. The fence was broken in 2 places. A dented mailbox stood in the corner, with no house to belong to. But in the light of early morning, when the mist burned off and the sky softened into something resembling spring, even in November, it looked like possibility. Lena stood beside the open garage door, wrapped in her long coat, a knit cap tugged low over her ears. She held a mug of black tea with both hands, letting the steam warm her face. Cal stood beside her, leaning against the doorframe, a screwdriver tucked behind one ear like always. Neither spoke for a while. Then she said, "I don't think I've ever been offered land before." Cal sipped his coffee. "It's not a bad lot. It's not much of anything. Yet." That word hung in the air, simple, small, but full of weight. She glanced sideways at him. "You ever thought about expanding the garage?" "Thought about closing it once," he admitted, "back when things got quiet. Before all this." She didn't press, but her silence invited him to go on. "I couldn't keep up with the bills after Rachel passed," he said. "Didn't have the heart to advertise. Town thought I'd already shut down. I just kept showing up, kept the door unlocked in case someone wandered in." He looked down at the mug in his hands. "Funny thing is, the day I almost closed it for good, Eli left a wrench on the counter. No note, just the wrench. Like he was saying, 'Don't give up yet.'" Lena's gaze drifted back to the lot. "What if," she said slowly, "we didn't expand the garage?" Cal raised an eyebrow. "You planning a chicken farm out there?" She grinned. "No, but what if we made something different?" She gestured with her chin toward the patch of land. "A place for people like me, like Eli, like Jake's grandma. People who've been told they take up too much space, or not enough. A shelter? Not quite. Something warmer. Something between a repair shop and a living room. A place for tea, for stories, for second cups and second chances." He studied her. "You're serious." "I'm always serious when I talk about tea," she said with a smile, then softened. "But yes, I mean it. I want to build something that doesn't exist yet. A space that doesn't ask people to fix themselves before being welcome." He looked back at the lot. "You'd call it what?" She paused. "Tea and tools." Cal blinked. "You just made that up." "On the spot," she said proudly. "Catchy, right?" He tried to hide his smile behind the rim of his mug, but failed. She continued, "I don't need the land to prove something to my father, and I don't want it out of guilt. But if I say yes to it, I want it to mean something." Cal nodded slowly. "So say yes." "I'm scared it won't work." "That's how you know it might be worth doing." A soft breeze moved through the open door, stirring the papers on the workbench and bringing in the smell of pine and distant chimney smoke. Lena felt her shoulders relax, not from certainty, but from the strange relief of naming a dream out loud. Later that day, they began clearing the edges of the lot. Nothing dramatic, just a rake here, a bag of trash there. Cal dug up the old bicycle frame and set it aside, and Lena wheeled along the perimeter, sketching rough ideas in a notepad. An open porch, low ramps, wide windows, shelves for books and mugs with mismatched handles. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. By sunset, they were both dusty and tired. Cal had a new scratch on his hand. Lena had dirt under her fingernails. They sat on the back step of the garage, eating sandwiches Eli had left in the fridge. Peanut butter, thick and clumsy. Lena took a bite and smiled. "He's warming up." Cal nodded. "He left a comic book on the table last night. An offering? Maybe, or bait." They both chuckled. Then Lena's expression turned thoughtful. "You know, when I was younger, I thought starting over meant erasing everything, like burning it down and building from scratch." She looked out across the darkening lot. "But maybe starting over just means choosing again, with more heart this time. Cal didn't reply, but he reached over and handed her a clean shop rag, gently brushing a leaf from her shoulder before leaning back against the step. Above them, the stars began to appear. Not many, just enough. A simple sky, a quiet lot, a garage with the lights still on. No ribbon, no applause. Just a gift, freely given, finally accepted. By the time the first snow dusted the roof of the old garage, the lot next door no longer looked abandoned. The weeds were gone, replaced by a gravel path edged in salvaged bricks. Cal had laid them himself one by one, with Lena reading aloud from the porch. Essays, recipes, parts of a tattered manual on antique toasters. Whatever she could find in the donated books box from the library. Where the broken fence had stood, there was now a hand-painted sign in clean block letters. Tea and Tools Repairs, Rest and Refills. The building wasn't much yet, just a refurbished garden shed with new windows, a ramp, and a heater that clicked loudly in protest each morning. But inside it glowed. There were 4 mismatched chairs around a low table, a shelf with mugs that didn't match, and a kettle that hissed like an old friend clearing its throat. One corner held a stack of magazines, crosswords, and large print poetry books. Another had a small workbench with tools organized lovingly by Lena herself. The town hadn't quite figured out what to make of it. Some walked by slowly, glancing sideways but not stopping. Others poked their heads in out of curiosity, asking, "Is this the new coffee place? Or, you fix vacuum cleaners too?" But the ones who stayed, the ones who really needed it, understood right away. Jake's grandma came first, wheeling herself in with a tin of banana bread and a story about the time she almost joined a motorcycle club in '68. She stayed for an hour and left with her walker's loose bolt tightened and a promise to return with puzzles. Then came Mr. Donnelly, who hadn't spoken to anyone since his wife passed in the spring. He brought an old transistor radio in a grocery bag and left it, and himself, in Lena's care for the better part of an afternoon. Every visit ended with tea. Every cup ended with quiet, and not the uncomfortable kind. Cal repaired. Lena listened, and Eli, though still quiet, started setting out the mugs before the first guest arrived each morning. One afternoon, Cal watched from the garage as Lena helped a woman with arthritis open her thermos. The woman laughed too loudly, apologized too quickly, but Lena didn't flinch. She touched the woman's hand gently, said, "You're exactly right on time," and poured her a cup like she'd been waiting all morning just for her. Later, as they were closing, Cal said, "You know, this might actually work." Lena raised an eyebrow. "Tea and tools? The whole thing. This kindness in a cup, warmth in a wrench." She chuckled, tying her scarf tighter around her neck. "It's not complicated. People just want to be met where they are." He nodded, staring out across the path where Jake had left a chalk drawing of a spaceship that afternoon. "Rachel used to say that. She sounds like someone I would have liked. You remind me of her sometimes." Lena's smile softened. "Well, I'll take that as a high compliment." They didn't say much more, but their silence was different now. Less like distance, more like breath. That weekend, Eli surprised them. They were halfway through reorganizing the tool cabinet when he appeared at the doorway of the tea room, holding a stack of papers. "I made a flyer," he mumbled, setting it down on the table before turning to leave. Lena picked it up. It was hand-drawn, sketched in pencil with bold block letters and a few rough illustrations. Tea and Tools, a place for people and parts that need a little love. Hot drinks, small repairs, and big listening, all welcome. Cal turned it over, reading in silence. Lena looked up. "Eli, this is beautiful." He shrugged, eyes on the floor. Didn't have anything else to do. "You want to print a few?" Cal asked. Eli nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I can post some at the school, the library, maybe the diner." They let him go without fuss. But when he was gone, Cal's hand lingered on the flyer a little longer than necessary. "You know," he said, "it took me a year to get him to say more than 2 words to the mailman." Lena smiled, tracing the sketch of a teacup in the corner. "He's saying plenty now." That evening, Lena brewed a special batch of spiced apple tea. She wrote a small note on the chalkboard by the door. "Today's brew, for warmth you forgot you needed." And people came. Slowly but steadily. They came with broken can openers and leaking thermoses, with arthritic hands and old photographs, with stories they hadn't told in years or maybe ever. They came because the place smelled like cinnamon and WD-40, because the light through the front window felt honest, because when Lena asked, "How are you today?" she actually waited for an answer. And they stayed because someone fixed what they brought, be it a frayed cable or a splintered heart. That night, long after the last chair had been pushed in, Cal stood at the edge of the cleared lot and looked out at the sky. It was dark, but not empty. Stars peeked through thin clouds. The snow hadn't come again, but the air hinted at it. Lena stepped beside him, pulling her coat tight. She didn't speak right away. Then she said, "I didn't think I could be part of something again. Not really, not after everything." "You didn't just join something," Cal said. "You made it." She was quiet a moment. "So did you." They stood like that, shoulder to shoulder, not needing anything more. Behind them, the light in the tea room glowed on, just for a little while longer. It began with a crown. Paper, crooked, and made from an old napkin. Jake had crafted it, scissors in hand, tongue poking from the corner of his mouth like a miniature architect, and insisted Lena wear it all afternoon. "For official fairy business," he'd explained solemnly. Lena had tried to protest, but when she caught her reflection in the tea room's window, blanket over her lap, steam curling from the cup in her hand, and the wonky crown perched on her head like a misplaced halo, she had to admit it felt right. So she wore it. And when the older folks came in that day, Mrs. Baxter with her ancient toaster, Mr. Donnelly with nothing more than silence, they smiled at the sight of her and said, "What's the occasion?" Lena always gave the same answer: "I've been promoted," to what she never said. That afternoon, Cal found her mid-story, surrounded by 3 kids, 2 seniors, and Eli standing in the corner, arms crossed but listening, really listening. She was reading from an old children's book about a hedgehog that couldn't hibernate because he drank too much tea. Every voice in the room was waiting on her next line. And then she laughed. Not the small, polite chuckle she'd given over mugs of chamomile. Not the dry, amused huff she'd used when Cal made a rare joke, but a real laugh, deep, unguarded, belly-shaking. It came out of her so suddenly that she startled herself. The room echoed with it. Cal froze in the doorway. Eli looked up, and Jake beamed, whispering, "Told you she was a real fairy." Lena wiped tears from her eyes. Sorry, I just... Oh, that hedgehog has no business drinking 5 cups of peppermint tea." The room erupted again, laughter like sunlight breaking through a long stretch of cloud. Even Eli cracked a grin. When it quieted, Cal stepped in and said, "I think the crown's gone to your head." Lena grinned, "And it's about time." Later, when the crowd had thinned and the tea room was back to its warm stillness, Lena found herself sitting beside Cal on the porch steps, the crown now resting beside her like a medal of honor. "You heard it," she said. "I did." She looked at him sideways. "I haven't laughed like that in years." "I know." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind that didn't need filling. Then Cal said, "It suited you." "What did?" "The joy." She looked away, blinking against the wind. "You've been good at hiding," he added gently. "Not pretending, just shielding." "I didn't want to be someone's inspiration story," she said, "or their pity project. I didn't want to perform for people's comfort, so I figured if I stayed quiet, no one would try to fix me. I never thought you were broken." She met his gaze. "That's why I stayed." Inside the garage, Eli was organizing sockets by size. Cal watched him through the window, focused, patient, quietly humming something under his breath. "He's different lately," Lena said. "He's lighter," Cal replied. "Do you think he's healing?" Cal considered. "I think he's remembering how to hope." It paused. Then softly, Lena said, "I think I am too." The next day, the community gave back. It started with Jake's grandma, who brought a basket of freshly baked ginger cookies for fairy strength. Then came the pastor from the local chapel, who offered folding chairs and tablecloths for free. By evening, someone had left a box of vintage teacups at the doorstep with a note. "Use these for the brave ones." Lena lined the cups on a shelf and stared at them for a long time. "I don't know how to deserve this," she whispered. Cal behind her said, "You don't have to, just accept it." That night, Eli joined them at the table. No headphones, no hoodie pulled up. He poured tea for himself, asked if he could stay, and he did. They played cards. Jake taught them all a game he'd made up. Cal lost spectacularly. Lena nearly fell out of her chair laughing again. And at some point, when the porch light was on and the rest of the world was quiet, Eli looked at Lena and said, "You're kind of like Mom." Lena's breath caught. Cal looked up, startled. Eli shrugged. "Not in a weird way, just when you talk, the room gets warmer." She didn't know what to say, so she just reached across the table and touched his hand. It was enough. When they closed up that night, Cal lingered on the porch steps. Lena stood beside him, arms folded, breath visible in the cold. "You ever wonder," she asked, "why certain people find each other?" Cal looked at her. "Sometimes." And what do you think? I think, he said slowly, the world gets very loud. And sometimes the people who've been quiet the longest are the ones we hear the clearest when we finally listen. Lena looked out at the stars, twinkling above the tea room roof. I used to think silence meant loneliness, she said. But now, I think it can be sanctuary. He nodded. They didn't say anything else. Because sometimes the first real laugh is enough. And the quiet after is sacred. What part of the world are you watching from? We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Whether you're listening from a small town like the one in our story, or a busy city halfway across the globe. And if this story touched your heart, even just a little, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you won't miss the next story we share. We believe in stories that heal, that remind us of the quiet strength and kindness and the power of simply being seen. If that resonates with you, you're in the right place. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for watching. Until next time, take care, stay warm, and never underestimate the quiet ones.